Oh, here's me grooving and bopping along. I just love our intro.
Yeah, it's got a nice catchy rhythm to it.
It gets me going for the day. And happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome. Here we are on the 29th of March already, if you can believe that.
Yeah,
And
it'll be April next week.
Good grief.
Years
So to
going
all of
by.
our viewers that are out there getting ready for closing sales at the end of the month, wishing you all the best of success. And
Happy hunting.
yeah, and speaking of success, I'm really excited today. The topic that we're going to be talking about actually is, finding success and growing even when economic times are difficult, right, Ken? And as we know that the R word has been on everyone's lips and minds for quite some time now. And I do know that personally for me, going to the grocery store, I bring a box of Kleenex every time because I cry when I see the prices go up on eggs or butter or heaven forbid steak. I'm a huge beef fan, but man, I've been putting myself on a budget, right? Like it's crazy. So between inflation and potential slowdowns and stuff, it's been crazy. But the good news is we have a guest today who can help us with that, right?
That's right, we do, and I'm looking forward to talking to our guest. And so obviously, as always, we want you to put your. Oh, I hit the wrong button now. I was going to say, put your comments and questions in. And then we'll talk about my favorite question. Where are you watching from? I'm still home in my office. This is probably the longest streak since Wes and I have worked together that I have been home in my office.
I think so.
I can tell where you are too, Wes.
Yeah, you can see Mr. Bones there in the background and all my regular things. So I am here in Canada. For those who are tuning in that have not seen the program before, I live right on Lake Erie, just across the border from Buffalo, New York. So go Bills next season anyway.
Yep, and I am in Central Florida, right in the middle of the state.
And we'll bring in our guest, Ray Sheehan, owner of Old City Media. How are you, Ray?
Good morning, and thank you for having me on the pod.
Well, thanks for coming in. An absolute pleasure. And we talked a little bit about it before the show, but maybe you can share with our viewers where you're joining us from.
Yeah, I'm joining you from just north of Philadelphia and just south of New York, the city. I'm in Pennsylvania, Bucks County, beautiful area here with my wife and two kids. So yeah, it's hello from Pennsylvania.
Well, that's awesome. Welcome. And for anyone else that is tuned in, please make sure you let us know where you're watching from as well. And it's always more fun when you leave your comments and questions. So if you have any as we move through, make sure that we go through those. And Old City Media, very cool, title for your company. I'm actually going to bring it up and let people have a quick peek at your website. And maybe you can tell us, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you came up with the concept for the name.
Yeah, well, again, appreciate you having me today. So Old City Media really originated from Old City, Philadelphia. So a lot of history there, Declaration of Independence, obviously. So we started the business there 20 years ago, and I come from the special event space. So we used to produce a lot of events, festivals, galas in Philadelphia, and the brand and our company has really grown from there over the past 20 years.
Well, that's great. And congratulations on that. Love being on the website. Looks like everything's good. Top 100 Stellar Marketing for 2023. So congratulations on the accolade as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So let me ask this question then. Because, in the information we got ahead of time, one of the things you mentioned was the need to create clear communication pathways with customers. And I'm a fan of that. I believe in communicating and learning to understand your customers. So what are some of the things you suggest to clients that work with you about how they do that?
Yeah, so just to kind of give everyone a little context here, and I'll try to be very, not long-winded. So I come from the special event space. So for the past 20 years, our team would go out and produce large-scale festivals, big events. And with doing these large events, take the beer, wine, the taco vendors, the food trucks, put them off to the side for a second. And we worked with a lot of brands. Think Geico, State Farm, T-Mobile, AT&T. Large brands would come to our events to engage with our event attendees. And brands still do this today, whether they're going to the home show, the boat show, the RV show, the local parade on Main Street in any sort of community or neighborhood. the brands that we work with, obviously for me, it was always, how are you going to engage your target audience? What is that clear way to the target audience? And for us, 3 years ago, when COVID landed on our lap, being in the event space, we could no longer bring people together, right? With the exception of you being in Florida, I know it was a little bit of the Wild Wild West down there, but for everywhere else, we couldn't bring people together. So what I started to explain to the brands, we need to start to fish where the fish are. And we developed a strategy to have the brands go out and find strategic partners. What are some strategic partners that align with your brand? And our strategy was retail. Because if you remember at the time, the one thing that we could not shut down were places that sold essential items, hardware stores, grocery stores, retail stores that sold essential items. So our strategy was, hey, let's put you in front of the end consumer, your target customer, in a safe and socially responsible way. And that's what we did. So 3 years later, the strategy was, hey, let's get your brand in front of your target consumer. Let's leverage the relationship with that Ace Hardware store or that local grocery store, and let's put you on the front lines with your potential target audience. So that was the impetus of this, and that's kind of how we got here today. From the special event space, we couldn't produce events anymore. We needed to adapt and pivot. Our brands, they needed to adapt and pivot because they were totally leveraged to events. And a lot of your listeners out here right now probably saw that. Their field marketing teams could not go out and do what they needed to do to drive leads or to put those leads into the lead funnel. We created a solution based around retail that was started out as a program, has turned into a full-blown business.
Yeah, and I think too that there's a bit of an event hangover that still exists, right? I've noticed that for various events that I've attended, a lot of them are more lightly attended, if you will. And, is that a thing that's going to continue, do you think, or is that just, kind of a phase?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are obviously still concerned, and I respect that, right? There are people maybe who have underlying issues and stuff like that. So when you're producing an event, or you're an event producer, or you're going to an event as a brand, you need to be sensitive about that there is a portion, whether it's 5% or 10%, that are still not comfortable going to a large scale event. The reality is that's out there, right? So when you're trying to compete for audience, you're trying to compete with the consumer only has so much money. Are they going to the movie theater? Are they going on vacation? Are they going to a sporting event? Are they going to a concert? Whatever it is that they're doing, there's only so much discretionary income. And you mentioned it with inflation, and nobody wants to say the R word, that people are being very mindful of how are they spending their money. So they're thinking twice, like, do I need to go to that event, or do I need to go to that sort of festival or concert? So you're absolutely right. That's definitely still on the minds of a consumer of how they're spending their discretionary income.
Yeah, and I'll be speaking actually this afternoon at my first virtual conference. And that's something I had to do once actually out of necessity. And Ken, you remember this because you were at the BTA meeting when I was supposed to be there speaking on a topic. And couldn't because of border issues. This was right during the peak of COVID, right? Just when things were, starting to, come down. So really interesting perspective. And I wonder, just kind of, it's probably a good segue, right? When we think about how challenging some of this stuff is with discretionary income and everything else, I think it must be more important than ever to anticipate our customer needs before they arise, right? So that we can actually attend to them before our competitors do. So maybe you can talk on this a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, when the clear path that I was explaining to the brands, like, hey, let's get out and let's integrate your brand into the fabric of the community, right? And by doing that, it's just the level of engagement is going to increase. And now you're able to go out and you're really able to understand your target audience. You're now able to engage that consumer like you've really never done before. And now you're able to really understand, well, how do I need to engage that consumer? How do I need to communicate with that consumer? What levers do I need to pull to get that lead into our lead funnel? And then once that lead is into our lead funnel, what is the mapping? How are we following that consumer through, whether it's our social or whether it's through our website, whatever the case may be. So yes, going out and making sure that you have a clear path and a clear plan before you actually put together your marketing strategy is something that we advise all of our clients to do before they go out to a grocery store or retail store, or now with all these events that are now starting to pop up.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We work primarily in the business to business space, and one of the things that I've encouraged, I teach a service management class, for our industry, and one of the things I tell my service managers is they should do, and it's something I borrowed from, I'll think of his name, Carl Sewell, who wrote Customers for Life, but he would do what he called the reverse lunch and learn. So he would bring customers in, and rather than trying to teach them about what they had in the way of new products, he'd bring them in and ask them about, what they could do better as a company, what they liked about doing business, what they didn't like about doing business. And I tell my service managers, one of the questions that you want to ask are, what are some of the other technology issues you deal with that you're not happy with your solution? Because to me, that's like getting them to tell you what they want you to do for them.
No, you're exactly right. So for me, and I'm a salesperson, so for me, it's always, how can I immediately get into solution-based thinking? And whatever brand or whatever, whether it's B2B or B2C, whatever the case may be, fully understanding what are their challenges, what's keeping you up at night when you're in the shower, you're by yourself, you're cleaning your hair. There's all these thoughts that kind of go through your mind. These are the different pain points or different challenges that you're dealing with, and having the ability to engage your target audience, your potential customer, and being able to ask those questions and then develop a strategy or a plan that answers their challenges, to me, is the strategy of being able to ask those really direct questions and really understanding what are their challenges and then creating a solution for them.
Yeah, because obviously, if you're the first person in the door with a solution to a problem, maybe even it's a problem that they didn't know they had until you mention it. If you're the only one talking about it, you're not in competition with anybody. If you're selling the same thing 9 other people are selling, then it's going to be who's the cheapest. So I like to find ways to get out of that let's run to the bottom mentality.
Yeah, and to me, and you guys are doing a fantastic job with this. And to me, it's not only just providing a solution, but to me, it's wherever you can provide value. And that can be something as simple as just insight or research, where your potential customer is looking at like, wow, this guy Ray, yes, something is a product or a service, whatever the case may be, but he's also providing some real valuable insight, whether or not you get the sale or not. But the reality is that you're coming to them with a potential idea or a different point of view or a different story or whatever the case may be, or just a different narrative. To me, that's going to put you one leg up on your competition.
I love that. And someone once said to me, it's an expression that I'll never forget, and I bring it up often, is that money is not the only currency, right? So when you talk about this idea of adding value and everything else, that can come back to you in other ways as well, right? And speaking of different things and incentives and rewards for loyalty, maybe we'll talk to that point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of go back to, from our experience in experiential marketing, that's all we do is really offer incentives and rewards to kind of just enhance that brand affinity for your target consumer or your B2B, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of different things that we've done in the past, especially with brands that are going out and they're starting to go out into the field and they're going out and they're engaging their target audience. So what exactly are you doing from an incentive base or potentially a leave behind or a marketing tool, something that, so after they have that experience with you, what are they taking away from that experience? What are they taking away from that sort of interaction? How are you creating more brand affinity with that target customer? And it could be something like I said, a leap behind a pamphlet. In the case that we work with, a lot of the brands that we work with, it's typically some sort of merchandise that we're using from a loyalty perspective. Obviously, if you're working with a client and you want to create some sort of loyalty incentive to incentivize them to potentially do more work with your company. So there's a lot of different tips and tricks to use for us and the brands that we're working with, primarily from an experiential standpoint. We're doing whatever we can to enhance that consumer experience, give them something from a takeaway, or hopefully that when they walk away from that experience, they're now thinking more differently about that brand interaction.
Okay, so that brought a question to my mind because we're talking about leave behinds. And so many times when a sales rep goes in, the things that he leaves with a client really are promotional sales type material. But it occurred to me, because we see this a lot on in social media and companies that do marketing on YouTube and stuff, where they'll have a giveaway, like and the term would be a freemium. And so I was thinking, it just occurred to me, and see what you think of this as an idea. So going into a business and we're talking about office equipment, we could create like a buyer's guide for office equipment and not make it about anything about us. But here are some of the things to think about, and go through the points that would be important to that buyer, make it completely vendor neutral, and share that with them, so that as they're talking to other people, they'll know the right questions to ask. They'll know what they should look at. Now, obviously, we're going to make sure that our proposals and our offer meet all of the things that are in our buying guide. But again, it's something that would be a useful tool. What do you think of that? Is that a good idea?
I think it's a fantastic idea. And again, so for me, it's like when you're going in and you're having a conversation, what sort of additional value can you provide? Because you can think about it. There's another competing product. You might think your product's better, their product's better, our product's more sophisticated. Everyone, not granted, you're probably going to think your product is better, right? It's obviously your product. What other things can you do above and beyond your product from a value perspective? What other sort of incentives can you provide? And maybe something as simple as cost saving. Great, I'm going to save some money. Clearly, people are making business decisions based off of the economics of the deal, right? But like you said, there's other currency out there. And if you can provide some additional value, insight, ideas, different ways of thinking, to me, that is a real way to engage your target buyer.
Yeah, I love that as an idea. I think that's an important piece of it. And I love the concept of giving back, because the more you provide them of value, the more you're going to build some trust and credibility.
100%.
I was thinking of some other incentives and rewards, right? And, in my wife's world, she's a retailer. So she actually has a loyalty program for her customers. And by the way, that's another area that's been hugely impacted, sort of by the changing times, right? And certainly with the economy, less discretionary income, right? So I know that she does have a loyalty program for some of her bigger customers, right? Where she's built in incentives for them that they get rewarded on, obviously purchases after, they spend a certain dollar amount over time. And it's almost like, I don't know what you call them, just like store credits, right? But it's kind of gamified. And is that kind of another way, to do that, is to make sure that they're getting something that's tangible, in return for the loyalty?
Absolutely. I think so. I have kids. I think about how many times I go to like a local ice cream place and they punch the card. It's like, I'm only like 8 punches away or 3 punches away of getting a free ice cream cone. Something is like that.
Right.
Obviously, it works. But now you take that on a much larger level. Obviously, your audience out there that's thinking from a business perspective, the philosophy, the strategy is exactly the same. It's right. How do you kind of move them along? How do you kind of engage them a little more? How do you kind of get more purchasing power out of them? And how do you do that? You reward them, right? And those little incentives absolutely work.
That's interesting, because another thing I do that's maybe a little more along the lines of giving something is I encourage my service managers to have like a contest or a drawing every month for all the customers that leave them a review on social media. And I tell them to make it not something for the company, but make it something for the individual. So like a dinner for two or something like that, so that they start to get, the reviews, and all of that's going to help their prominence on, with Google and in other places. Plus, again, lots of positive reviews brings credibility. Would that be along the lines of what you're talking about in an incentive?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, we're talking about it more from the business perspective, but think about it from a staff perspective. Your employees, right? Incentivizing and rewarding them. Like, we all know there is a major talent shortage out there, and there's now all these layoffs. So what are you doing to retain talent? How are you retaining your talent? How are you rewarding them, right? And some of them, it just might be lifestyle. Right? Maybe it's a day off. Maybe, obviously, a lot of people are motivated by money. Maybe it's the economics of it. Maybe it's, to your point, dinner for two with a significant other. It could be a lot of different things. And you need to figure out, when you engage your team, You figure out what do they enjoy doing. Maybe somebody loves going golfing. Great. That could be a fantastic incentive. How are you creating a better culture within your work environment? So incentives could be looked at, hey, how can I incentivize my potential target customer? But how am I incentivizing and rewarding, which is the lifeblood of my business, my employees?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's go to our last question here. And this was something that I think a lot of companies deal with, no matter what their marketing, what their market is like, whether it's retail or business to business.
Yeah, this
But
looks
we
like
all
it's
have
always
to
a good
look-
idea.
Yeah, we always have to look at how do we do cost reduction, but do it in a way that doesn't impact customers or employees.
So for me, your audience out here probably in a lot of different verticals and a lot of different industries. And I think one thing that probably is synergistic between all verticals, what sort of strategic partners are out there? And there's probably times where people think of a strategic partner, like, I don't want to have a partnership, or they're a competitor, or there's a lot of negative connotation. And I think if anything, over these past 2 to 3 years, if we've learned anything, we need to think differently. And there could be a potential strategic partner out there whereby potentially partnering with them, maybe there's some goodwill within the community. Now your brand's looked at differently. Maybe there's some co-op saving from a marketing perspective. Now you're getting better reach. Maybe there's resources. Maybe it's talent. It could be, we could go on. There's a myriad of things. But for me, one thing that could absolutely potentially just save money, what are some strategic partners out there that align with your brand? How can you have a conversation with that brand, and how can you identify some potential efficiencies? If you can figure that out, and it's not easy, but if you can figure that out, you could potentially save money and grow your brand without hurting the integrity of your brand. So strategic partnerships would be one area that if you're not exploring and not looking into, that would be an area that I would entertain.
And is that co-branding basically that you're talking about, like actually being able to leverage, kind of, maybe the brand and some of the other things of that organization as well?
Yeah, it could be something as simple as marketing, right? Like they have an audience, they have a following, they have a community, and you're leveraging whatever it is that you're doing and what they're doing. And just, it could be somebody's just tapping on the shoulder, like, hey, found this really interesting article. Hey, look what this company over here is doing. Or like they did a food drive last month. It could be something as simple as that, just giving back to the community and having a conversation about that. Like, hey, I'm going to scratch your back and you're now going to scratch my back. I'm going to leverage my audience. You're going to leverage your audience. It's not going to cost us a dime, but we're probably going to get something out of this. And ultimately, we're doing something good. Our employees love it. You're creating a better culture. And maybe you engage a consumer that you've never engaged before. Or maybe you've engaged a business owner that you've never engaged before, just by simply reaching out and trying to think about a potential strategic partner.
Yeah, and it's funny. Sometimes I guess they can be direct competitors too, right? Both Ken and I belong to an organization called the Managed Print Service Association, and I'm the current president, and the two other execs on my team, both for the finance and also our secretary, are direct competitors. But the amount of goodwill and work that we get done together through that organization, even though they are direct competitors, it's astounding, right? And I know that's a very severe kind of example, but it just showcases, I think, that it can be done, right? That you really can work with other brands.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do it with a competitor, then that is like, that's next level thinking. That's really good problem solving. Like, you are really good at what you do and engaging with other humans. Typically, I see it with just like there's some brand alignment there, which typically most brands are probably more open to that. Hey, I don't see a competitor here. I see more synergies here. But if you can create a strategic partnership with your competitor, God bless you. You are really good at what you're doing.
Well, and like I said, at least with the Managed Print Service Association, our mission is, essentially that rising tides raise all boats, right?
Yeah.
And I know that when they're competing for business, that it's not like that, but nonetheless, an extreme example of just finding ways, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, that you really can work with people that maybe you didn't think you could, right?
Yeah, a big part of my business and why, I don't want to say why I've been so successful, but the success that I've had is really strategic partners. And whether it's the brands, the events, where we go, all of that is really being created by really good strategic partners. And it's helped us grow and branch out and leverage those relationships and continue to scale the business. So without those strategic partnerships, we would not even be close to where we are today. So it might not work for every business in every vertical. I like to think it can, but that's how I would probably answer that question.
Well, I can think of one example in our space, Ken, which would be off-squibment dealers, right? So Ray, in the off-squibment channel, they're basically experts at selling and leasing and providing services and supplies for printers and copiers, right? But as the world's evolving, and obviously people are doing work in different ways, some of those workflows are changing. And a lot of them have chosen strategic partnerships with managed IT providers or cybersecurity providers who offer additional services that their customers will benefit from, right? So is that kind of a fair, strategic alignment where you're working with these other providers to provide things that maybe you don't, but your customers still need?
That's exactly right. Like, you think about your business and you think about all the different touch points of your business, and then you think about who is your customer and what does your customer, who are they breaking bread with? Who are they dealing business with? And now you think about, okay, I understand my customer. My customer does other business with other brands and other companies. Who do they probably work with? And now, can I connect those two dots? And if you can figure that out and you can connect those dots, and now you and that brand have a conversation of like, how can we work together potentially? Now you're on to something.
I love it. And hey, in respect for your time and for that of our viewers, we are coming down to the bottom of the live stream today. And really, really cannot thank you enough for joining us and helping our viewers to, understand how they can actually better, survive and grow in these strange economic times in which we live. And I know that they can get in touch with you. I'm going to put your website back up here too for a second. So at oldcitymedia.com. And you can see the website here. I did notice as well that when you're on the page that they can click in and see what your structure is, how the organization works, what you do, who you work with, and some of the blogs and stuff as well. And I was secretly kind of digging into this one that you did here on sort of the mobile roadshows. So lots of great content for people to learn from there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. I know I'm probably a different type of guest. We do obviously a lot in the B2C space. So hopefully I was able to provide a little insight, a little value to your audience. But yeah, absolutely. If the brand is out there, if you're a brand manager thinking about any sort of experiential marketing, if you heard about it, you thought about it, you have your digital, you have your above the line, you have those lead funnels. But now you are thinking about, hey, how can we take it one step further? Ray mentioned partnership. He mentioned about potentially getting our brand out there to engage with a different audience. That's where we could potentially come in and provide some insight. Even if it's just a conversation, I can at least get a little smarter about your business, maybe, point you down a path and kind of send you on your way. Or we could have a much deeper conversation of like, hey, here's how we could take your brand out into the community. So no, I appreciate you guys having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it.
And Ken, I think you've got something up in there for us to talk about next week's show. Is that right?
We do. And in fact, very good. Thank you. So next week we have Allie Green. She's going to talk about managing remote work and coping with the challenges, because there's a lot of questions about managing people remotely. And so Allie's going to be here and help us get smarter about that.
Well, that's great. And Ray, cannot thank you enough for being with us this week. And for all of our viewers out there, if you're watching live or if you're watching the rebroadcast on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, until next time, I hope that you keep learning. And Ken?
Keep leveling up.
All right. Thanks again, Ray.
Thanks. Have a great day.